job is this evening, I'm going to continue the conversation that we've been having about joyful wisdom. Mingyur Rinpoche's book about how to be a Dharma person in the modern world. And we are, for those of you who have the book, we have now gotten to chapter 9 on empathy. And he's been talking about various kinds of meditation in order to increase our empathetic response. And last time we talked about ordinary loving kindness and compassion, focusing on people we like and people we don't like. And and then this week we're going to be talking about immeasurable loving kindness. For most of us, loving kindness begins with understanding that we are a person in this world and that and that we have some suffering, and that in our everyday life we encounter problems. And the problems that we encounter, we think maybe just our problems, but honestly, our problems are everybody's problems, because everybody has problems with the neighbors. Everybody has problems with the boss. Everybody has problems with the family. Everybody has problems with, excuse me, with the world. And everybody has problems with themselves sometimes. Sometimes we think everybody else has a great life, but we have a problem. And so what we have to do is we have to recognize that our suffering and other people's suffering are the same. And Mingyur Rinpoche, in the book, he gives a very painful example of having a needle in connected to some thread through both sides of you, saying, hey, this is you and this is somebody else. If you've got this going on for you, it's actually going on for other people too. I'm a little queasy about this example, so you'll have to forgive me is if I kind of leave that one behind for right now. I think it's easier to recognize that because we're all human beings in this world, and because we're all creatures in this world, we experience suffering. And as we experience suffering, we need to know we're not alone, and that other people are suffering just as we are. And when we think about this, it at first might feel a little overwhelming, but it also can feel a little bit reassuring that we are not alone. And so this is why in this particular exercise that we're going to talk about tonight, he talks about recognizing that all beings are similar in their wish for happiness. About maybe, I don't know, a few years ago, Trungpa Rinpoche gave a talk about this. And he's one of the great masters of our tradition, passed away last year, but has given many, many teachings. And if you go to Rinpoche.com, yes, somebody actually did get Rinpoche.com very early in the internet era. On Rinpoche.com, you'll find all manner of teachings by this amazing man, Trungpa Rinpoche. One of his teachings, he said, you have to understand that 100% of sentient beings care about their happiness. It's not like 80% want happiness and 20% don't care. 100% of beings want happiness. And when we recognize this, we recognize that if we have the capacity to give us at least lighten the spirits of people and assist people in feeling better, then that's something that we can do. And so at first, it's a little difficult to know what other people need. So rather than trying to figure out what does that person need and what does that person need, and can I really give things to other people that they need? Mingyur Rinpoche says we can use our imagination. We can use our imagination using the practice that is called sending and receiving, or Tonglen. And so in chapter 9, for those of you who have the paper book, it's on page 195. He talks about developing immeasurable loving kindness and compassion. And what he says here, he says, of course, developing loving kindness and compassion toward those we already know isn't so hard after we practice for a while. And he says it's a little bit more of a stretch to extend the same sense of warmth and relatedness to those we don't know, and in many cases, can't even possibly know. And he said, as we hear about tragedies around the world or even in our neighborhoods, a sense of helplessness and hopelessness can develop. There are only so many causes we can join. Sometimes our work and family lives prevent us from helping in a direct way. In the practice of immeasurable loving kindness and compassion, we helps to relieve that sense of hopelessness. It also fosters a sense of confidence that whatever situation in which we find ourselves and whomever we face, we have a basis for relating in a way that's not quite so fearful or hopeless. We can see possibilities to which we might otherwise be blind during and begin to develop a greater appreciation for the possibilities that are within us. And so in Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Dharma Paths, which I've shared with you several times during the talks that I've given, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche says it's great to learn theoretically about the Bodhisattva path. Theoretically, learning that there are beings who want to become enlightened and who undertake the path of the Bodhisattva in order to become enlightened Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for the benefit of all suffering beings. And he said, it sounds like a great idea and we'd like to try it. He said, but it stays theoretical until we start bringing our heart to bear in the wish to benefit sentient beings. And so this is why he said you can use your imagination in order to imagine a world in which you could benefit sentient beings just by wishing for it. And so that's the key theory behind doing Tonglen meditation. So in any case, oh, I love it. My computer thinks I'm talking to it. No, not now, computer. It just comes to life like, oh, you need me? I love it that they want to serve, but sometimes they amuse me. Anyway, that was very cute. I said the word theory. And they woke up again. Back to sleep now. They have to understand English. It's just too difficult. Anyway, so what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche says and what Mingyur Rinpoche says are the same, which is that right now we can't imagine helping people in places where there is war. We can't imagine helping people in places where there is illness and disease. We can't imagine helping people in conflict zones and so on. And so as a result, we can feel, and Mingyur Rinpoche says it here, that we can feel helpless in the face of everything that's going on. Maybe we feel helpless in the face of injustice, great injustice that's going on in the world, great injustice that's going on in our own lives. But we can at least entertain the notion that love is within us, and that if we can bring that love to bear on the problems that are in our own minds, then gradually we can bring this love to bear in the greater world itself. And so Mingyur Rinpoche then in the chapter goes on to explain the meaning of the Tibetan word Tonglen. Tong means to send and Len means to take. And in this exercise, we imagine that as we breathe out, we give goodness to all beings without exception, everywhere. And as we breathe in, we imagine that we remove suffering from beings everywhere. In Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's description of this, he said, when all of this suffering comes to us, it doesn't hurt us. He said, because of the purity of our motivation, the purity of our bodhisattva motivation and wanting to benefit others, so that when all of that suffering meets our pure heart, our pure motivation, all of the suffering, he said, dissolves into nothing and disappears. And then on the next out breath, we imagine that we give goodness to all beings. In his description, and I think this is really beautiful, he said that when we are doing the practice of Tonglen, that we sit comfortably and we allow our mind to relax a bit and our body to relax a bit. And as we do so, he said, we can think that our breath comes out and that it goes and benefits all sentient beings everywhere. And then he uses the example of sunlight spilling out over the valley in the morning when the sun arises above the horizon and fills the valley full of light. And he said, in this way, no being is left out of our compassion. So it spills like this sunlight that is flooding the valley. And then he said, as we breathe in, we imagine that whatever suffering there is in the world, that it comes to us, and that by coming to us, all beings around have been removed and relieved of it. And he said, and when this suffering comes to us, he said, it meets our pure heart and it dissolves into nothing and disappears. And I think this is very helpful because many people have some uncertainty and some concern about imagining that they bring into themselves the suffering of others. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche tried to allay our fears by using a rather comical example. He said, now, if you imagine that you have a sandwich in your hand, he said, and you take an imaginary bite from the imaginary sandwich and chew it and swallow it, he said, it's probably not going to relieve your hunger. And he said, and so in the same way, he said, you are using your imagination to imagine suffering. And so this imaginary suffering and this imaginary happiness that you're giving away are happening in your mind. He said, it's happening in your mind. And he said, and in your mind, you can do anything. He said, as a matter of fact, right now, he said, I can imagine the entire island of Manhattan above my head. That doesn't mean it's there. So he's trying to give us confidence that through our imagination, we can expand our loving heart to include beings that we've never met, beings that we don't see, beings that maybe we've heard about but have never met, and we just imagine use our imagination to expand our love to fill the entire universe. And I think this is wonderful. And even if that's the only part of the exercise you can do, it's still worth doing. So if you can only do the sending part and not the taking part, sending out goodness and love to all beings, and then if you can't do the removing of suffering from beings, seeing it dissolve and disappear, that's okay. At the very least, you can imagine extending your love to all beings. And so Mingyur Rinpoche in his explanation says much the same thing that my other teacher said, which is that all beings wish to be happy and all beings fall short. And so through our imagination, we can actually meet these beings, so to speak, with our imagination. We can reach out to them and help them in ways that they may not even know. So with our imagination, we are expanding our circle of love, and with our imagination, we're expanding the possibilities in our mind. So even if now we can't think about how to help this being or think about how to help that being, if we spend a little bit of time every day imagining as we breathe out that we give goodness to all beings. Even if we don't do the taking, just doing the sending is going to expand our possibilities for giving goodness and happiness to others. And Mingyur Rinpoche gives a few helpful hints in this, where he said you can even like use your hands as you're doing the visualization. He said you can have them resting on the tops of your legs, and as you breathe out, you can slide your hands forward, thinking that you're giving goodness to all beings. And as you're removing suffering, you can draw them back. But even if that exercise is not something that you find useful, that it's your imagination that's the most important. And what Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said when he taught this meditation, and Mingyur Rinpoche says the same thing. He says that when you're doing this meditation, he said it's good to do it for just a short period of time, and then to let your mind rest in between. Just rest in its own natural awareness. And by allowing your mind to just rest in its own natural awareness, you refresh yourself. And then you can go back and go into the visualization again and breathe out and give goodness to others. So this is the way to practice Tonglen in a way that's not overwhelming. You can do Tonglen for just a few minutes, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then allow your mind to rest, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and so forth. And then do Tonglen again, and then let your mind rest 1 minute, 2 minutes, and so forth. I find it easier to just do this for short periods of time. I don't try to do this over the period of a half an hour or an hour or anything like that, because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said it is better to do it for a brief period of time and gradually come to feel the happiness and goodness flowing from you to other beings than it is to get tired. And then he said when you get overly tired in meditation, he said you begin to feel a little bit confused and maybe resentful even, he said. So it's better to do it for a shorter period of time and have a good feeling about it than not. So I think the only other thing that is in this chapter that we haven't covered yet is on page 198, where Mingyur Rinpoche says within the Buddhist tradition, he said, we recognize two kinds of bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, and citta means mind. And it refers to training the mind in love and compassion. And training the mind in love and compassion is called relative bodhicitta. And absolute or ultimate bodhicitta is a coming to understand the nature of mind and the nature of all phenomena as empty luminosity. Well, that's a big topic. And as he says in the book, there are people who practice their whole lives and never quite understand or grasp absolute bodhicitta. He says, few among us are capable of experiencing absolute bodhicitta right away. However, he said in his own lifetime, the historical Buddha worked for 6 years to arrive at this fully awakened awareness. According to legend, he was only able to accomplish this in such a relative short period of time because he had spent many, many previous lifetimes working toward the goal. He said, most of us need to train along the more gradual path of relative bodhicitta. This extends to the various loving kindness and compassion practices a bit further in terms of the cultivation of the desire for all sentient beings to realize, and not just in an intellectual sense, but through actual experience, the full blossoming of their Buddha nature and taking actions to accomplish that goal. So in any case, then on page 199, he talks about, well, how do we practice bodhicitta? How do we become bodhisattvas in training? He said it begins with aspiration. He said we aspire to accomplish Buddhahood for the benefit of sentient beings, even if this seems a little impractical. He said we start with aspiration bodhicitta and then gradually begin to learn about the perfect virtues, the 6 perfect virtues, as a matter of fact, which is called action bodhicitta. So we start with the aspiration. May I become a Buddha for the benefit of suffering beings, and may I be able to shepherd all sentient beings to this same state. And then gradually over time, as we practice this practice of immeasurable loving kindness and compassion, he said we get closer and closer and closer to the goal. So he said, then he says, gradually, he said, as we practice aspiration and action bodhicitta, he said, we will discover that that there are, let's see, what does he say? There are many ways to practice application bodhicitta. For example, he says, this is on page 200, he said, refraining from stealing, lying, gossiping, and speaking or acting in ways that intentionally cause pain is a way of practicing application or action bodhicitta. Then he said, acting generously toward others, patching up quarrels, speaking gently and calmly, and rejoicing in the good things that happen to other people, rather than allowing ourselves to become overwhelmed by jealousy. He said, conduct of this sort extends the experience of loving kindness and compassion from our meditation into our everyday life. So it starts with our imagination in Tonglen practice and then gradually comes into play in our everyday life through trying to not harm beings and trying to benefit them in whatever way we can. And then he said, he said we create a win-win situation for everybody, he says. He said, as this recognition, he said, we win because we recognize we're not alone in experiencing different difficult emotions and problematic situations. Then he says, as this recognition sinks in, we begin to feel a deeper sense of confidence in ourselves and are able to respond more thoughtfully and compassionately to others. Those around us win because, having developed an intuitive sense of their suffering, we begin to act toward them in kinder, more considerate ways. So our imagination allows us to actually take action to benefit ourselves and others and treat ourselves more kindly too. He said, there's no greater, and he said, and he says, and when we act more kindly toward others, they start acting more kindly toward others in their lives too. He said, there's no greater inspiration and no greater courage than the intention to lead all beings to perfect freedom and complete well-being of recognizing their own true nature. Whether you accomplish the goal isn't important. I'm going to let that sit for a second. Whether we actually become a Buddha is not as important, he says, as making the effort, doing the training, using our aspiration and inspiration to attempt to be of benefit. He said, the intention alone has such power that as you work with it, your mind will become stronger, your mental and emotional habits will diminish, and by that, I'm sure he means bad ones, and you'll become more skillful at helping other beings. One person told me what doing Tonglen did for them was that it allowed them to see solutions better than they would have if they had not done Tonglen. Because they said otherwise, they said, we'd be trying too hard. We would be trying to, I want to solve this problem for you. And so the Tonglen allows us to accept other outcomes that are not me solving you, and instead have to do with me helping you to see your own solution. The idea of opening our hearts and minds to others' own creativity so that we can see they have creativity too, and saying, well, how would you address this? And so forth and so on, and finding ways in order to let people help themselves as well. So he says, in helping others, you'll create the causes and conditions for your own well-being. The understanding of suffering and its causes, the potential inherent within us, for Buddha nature, and the means of transforming that understanding into experience could be regarded as the happiness handbook that we have always wanted. He said, but as many people have asked, how do we apply the lessons of these into our own situations? What do we do when we are faced with anxiety, grief, jealousy, anger, or despair? And then that takes us to part 3, starting with chapter 10, which is application, extending our aspiration into our life on the path. But we'll start talking about that next time. But this time, I wanted to take a minute, because we've got just a little bit more time, if we could do a little bit of Tonglen together. So I'm going to do a little bit of a guided meditation on Tonglen. We did this last time, and so this will be familiar to those of you who were with us. And I'm going to use instructions similar to those I used the last time. And these are based on Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Dharma Paths. So he said, we have a theoretical understanding of bodhicitta, awakening mind, but we need to have a method of training in the awakening mind. And that's why we use our imagination to increase our love and compassion through the practice of Tonglen. So he said, you begin by sitting quietly and becoming aware of your breath. So that's how we'll start. Just becoming aware of the breath as it comes in and the breath as it goes out. And we'll do that for a minute or two. Next, we can use if it helps to close your eyes when you use your imagination, you can do that. And you can think that as you breathe out, you just allow your breath to be normal and natural. As you breathe out, you imagine that goodness and happiness, all of your goodness and happiness flow out of you. He said it's like sunlight flooding the valley. And you can imagine that wherever that light goes, it touches all sentient beings everywhere, and it gives them happiness and goodness. So we'll just spend a minute or two doing just that part, just on the out breath, sending out goodness to all sentient beings everywhere. Just with the out breath, giving goodness and happiness to all beings in your path. as the light touches them, it relieves them of all of their suffering. And now, if you wish to, you can do the second half, which is as you breathe in, you think you remove all of the suffering from sentient beings, that it all leaves them and it comes to you. And then Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, as the suffering merges with you, it uproots all of their suffering, all beings everywhere. And then he said, because of the power of your sincere wish to benefit beings, as soon as the suffering merges with you, he said, it dissolves into nothing and disappears. He said, it's as if you put a little pile of dust in your hand and a strong wind blew it away. So now we can do this combination: out breath giving happiness, in breath removing suffering, which dissolves into nothing and disappears. So we'll do this for a couple of minutes. Next, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche says you can let go of the mental focus, let go of the visualization. And he said, and attempt to have the sense that there are no sentient beings to meditate upon, there is no one meditating, and there's no act of meditation taking place. He said, allow your mind to release all of these concepts. And he said, and just let the mind rest in a place of awareness. He said, there's nothing, there's no you, no sentient beings, no action of meditation. He said, try to let all of that go and just rest the mind in its own natural awareness. And that's a short meditation for you this evening. The Mingyur Rinpoche, in the book, he encourages people to do this meditation regularly, and Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche does the same. He said, if you can do even just a short bit of it every day, he said, gradually over time, it will allow your mind to soften and relax. And you will actually, he said, become more creative in finding ways to be of benefit to yourself and others. So we've got like 10 minutes. So maybe we can have a discussion. if anybody has questions or curiosities, I think you can either use the raise hand function on your Zoom or uh, I think, let's see, who's moderating tonight?
That would be Lisa.
Okay, Lisa. Hey,
Yes,
Lisa.
sorry. Hi.
Hey. So if you see are there any questions appearing in chat?
Let's see. Oh, no, I just checked. Nothing
Okay.
yet.
Okay. Well, yeah, if people have questions, great.
Mute. There we go. Hi.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
A comment last week when we were talking about Tonglen, or I'm sorry, last session when we were
Message.
talking about Tonglen. Um, and I've seen this direction a number of times, putting the people you have trouble with in the back. And I actually find it more effective to put them up front and address them directly because if I have issues with them, if I feel a resentment, I'd really rather get that out of the way.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I've seen it done both ways, actually. I've seen it mentioned both ways. And so I think they're both excellent manners. And I think it depends on the person and the situation. I
mm,
think that what we have to do is we have to allow people to approach difficult people in their favorite method. And
mhm,
see, and I think some folks, if they thought, well, I have to do them, I have to make sure that I put them right out front so I can see them because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's, what I should do. It makes it a little overwhelming for some folks. So that's why it's, I think, good that it's taught both ways.
mm,
But I can completely like the idea of putting them up front so that you can deal with them right away. Because, there's different kinds of people, and some people they just want to like if there's a difficult situation, they just gravitate right toward it and they want to work with it right away. But there are other people who are more shy, and they prefer to take their time.
mm,
And for them, they can't imagine approaching a person that they have difficulty with. And so maybe for them, they'll need a little longer. But I do appreciate you sharing your approach because it's completely and utterly legit to do
mm.
it like that.
Well, it works for me.
Sure.
So anyway,
I think the cool thing is to know that there are that many different kinds of people. I think it's kind of cool. I'm glad you're out there, and I'm glad the shy ones are out there too, because they all can. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this in your work with people over the years, but everybody is like really different.
mm,
Um, everybody's really different, and when we recognize that everybody's really different, we're open to the different approaches that they have, and we're ready to cheerlead them no matter whether they're the brave ones or the shy ones.
mm, indeed.
I know it, but it's really good.
Mm,
I talked to a guy once, and he said of one of his friends, "Oh, yeah, that person, they when they've got a problem or a problem situation, they want to go right up and shake hands with it."
ah,
And I like that kind of approach.
mhm,
Like if there's a problem, they just want to walk right to it. I met a woman once who was a elementary school principal. And she said, "You know what my favorite thing is?" And I'm like, because I was interviewing her for the newspaper. And when I was a reporter, and I said, "No, what's your favorite thing?" And she said, "Angry parents. I love angry parents. Bring me angry parents. I love it." And she said, "I just love to engage them and help them find creative solutions for their kids." And I'm like, wow, I want to be like that when I grow up.
mm. Very admirable.
I mean, that just touched my heart, man. It really did when I heard her say that, because most folks that I know would just kind of want to like turn and go the other direction. But I just really admired her for that. And I admire what you're saying as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bring it, because I mean, in Great Path of Awakening, the Lojong Handbook, he says it's important to bring out extra love and extra feeling for beings who are difficult. So I really appreciate that. Okay, thank you. I see Viviana. Yes, hi.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Lama Kathy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, so my thing is that I cry a lot when I'm doing it, and sometimes it's just like it's overwhelmed. Like I cry. I keep doing it, and I like the advice about doing shorter because I think I was doing like long.
Yeah.
But I cry a lot. Why is that though?
Yeah, I tell you what, there are so many reasons why that could happen. There are so many reasons why that could happen. And you are not alone. Number one, I need to say you are not alone. I have talked to several people over the years. And I think what it is that there are so many reasons. So this may not be your reason, okay? But one person told me was that they themselves had been through a lot of things in their life, and it reminded the doing the Tonglen reminded them of things that had happened in their own life. But see, that may not be your situation. It could just be that you have this really tender place in the heart, and many lamas say that when you have this kind of tenderness in the heart, that it actually is a good sign. It's actually a good thing. But from my point of view, if you become like overwhelmed and you don't like crying, you don't want to cry, you want to, no, like stop crying, no crying, then that might be a little difficult. So, and maybe at that point, it might be, I mean, I don't know. What is your feeling about it? It's just that you can't stop, right?
What you mentioned earlier, I identify that, like
Okay.
remembering things that happened to me in the past that made me cry. Now that you say it, I remember instances that has happened. So yeah, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. Well, maybe there might be some benefit. There might be some benefit because, as a friend of mine said, when we have things that happen in our life, then this gives us, some difficulty. But as the one person said, it also gives, one of my lamas said this to me, it also gives us the capacity for more love
Mm,
because we understand what everybody's going through.
mm,
Okay. We understand in a way that nobody else can understand what people are going through. And a friend of mine said to me a long time ago, she said, oh, she said, you know what I wish? And, everybody wishes they're different than the way they are. Isn't it funny? You know? And this lady, she's like, I want to be different. She said, because I'm a crier too. Okay. So this is like, okay. So she says, I would like to be more like you. She said, because she says, I'm like a stone. She said, I'm like, no, nothing touches me. Nothing touches me. And I kind of go through life like a stone. And she said, I would prefer to have feelings, you know. And so I thought to myself, that is rather sad. Yeah. To have her feeling like, she's the rock. So I guess it's okay, but still, we have to find a way to do the practice. So if doing the practice for shorter periods of time is more useful, that could be good. The other thing that just to experiment, and see if this helps, right? Um, is to imagine that that you are actually in front of you, right? and that as you breathe out, you give goodness to yourself. Yeah. And as you breathe in, you accept and feel love for yourself. So it's like give out and giving healing, and in and accepting, and out and giving healing, and in accepting. And then do this maybe once or twice for yourself, and then do it once or twice for other beings who are feeling just like you. Who are feeling like you, and that because what Kempo Rinpoche, because he was telling me a little bit about how to deal with this, he said, do it for you, and then everybody who feels like you, and then he said, then everybody, all beings, because, and again, this can be very short. And if it continues to be a bit of a problem, then we can talk some more, about it and come up with some other strategies. But at first, let's just see. Because as I was saying to the other questioner, there's so many ways to do this. So many ways to do this for all the different kinds of people, right? So there was a great master who lived in the 17th century, and he actually said that if it makes you cry, he said that this is actually good, and it's called. But if it overwhelms the person, then that's not. Don't think that's what he had in mind. If it's overwhelming, right? So then that's when we have to try the other methods to see if we can create a different environment inside ourselves. Plus, hopefully this will help, right?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Kira
And, no,
sorry.
I appreciate it. And so now we have Kira has you'll be our last question tonight, Kira. So yes, go forward.
I'm unmuting me. Sorry.
We all have problems with the muting. I tell you, we've been
Me
doing
too. I have
Zoom for so many years.
anything that's electronic. I'm just a technotard. So, truly. So,
Sure.
my question is this. So, when we were doing Tonlin and sending out beams of sunlight, I thought, well, if you feel really bad, then even some warmth, the thing that's disturbing you is going to return. Like I had a car accident 2 days ago. Someone rear-ended me on the 10 going to Santa Monica, and it was kind of a hit and run, but I don't even know what happened because I was in shock. I'm
Right.
still kind of in shock.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to my mechanic today because it got part of my bumper off on the driver's side and also a big dent,
Yeah.
like beside the bumper, so it needs a whole new panel.
Uh-huh.
And when I was driving away, and I'm so stupid that I didn't even realize, well, if this person rear-ended me, it's their fault. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to see if anyone's pulling over, and no one was. And I drove very slowly because if you're familiar with the 10 after you go through West LA, there really isn't where to pull over, so conveniently or not, it was like right upon my exit that this occurred as I was going that lane to get off at Fifth. So anyway, what I found interesting is that even if I'm not at fault, I feel guilty that I did something wrong.
Yeah.
And there was a guy alongside me, then in front of me in the street who came off the freeway. And then I guess he was behind me, then he was ahead of me. And I thought, well, maybe he's who hit me or we hit. And I should just drive very slowly and see if he wants to talk to me. Not that if he wants to talk to me, but if he's going to motion or something, because I honestly don't know what hit me. And then
Mhm.
I just thought about like these conundrums where you don't know what to do,
Mhm.
and that feeling ignorant is the most painful thing of all,
Mhm.
I find, you know, and when I went to my mechanic actually left town, who's never goes away in the 5 years I know him, but he has other guys in the shop. So I went there today, and this guy who does body work was there, and he said, well, you should go to the Santa Monica police. They have cameras everywhere, and
Mhm.
find out who hit you. Because I have this like senior citizen insurance
Mhm.
that's just like basic liability, really. It's only like $400 a year. And in my neighborhood, it's like the most expensive part of Southern California to insure a car.
Mhm.
So I thought, if I can save some money, because it's expensive maintaining a car, putting gas in it. I have an older car, and my mechanic had just gotten my car like perfect. Like he fixed every little thing, aligned the tires like a week ago.
Mhm.
And that feeling of just when you think it's smooth sailing, you
Mhm.
know, that, and I hate that feeling that of, this always happens to me kind of feeling. But I
Mhm.
can't help but have that feeling. But when we were doing Len, I couldn't really do it for me.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I
Yeah.
did it for others, but saying, I hope no one else goes through, and that my having this accident avoid someone else being in that situation and
Mhm.
having their neck killing them and having this
Sure.
unexpected expense. Plus,
Mhm.
this body guy said, oh, and whoever fixes your car will need it for a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
And there was nothing worse in my life than when I didn't have a car and I had to, you know, take Ubers and have friends help me go look at cars and stuff like that. It was a nightmare.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
how, how do you I'm sorry to be long-winded. How do you practice Tonglen under those circumstances and feeling like you're in a state of shock?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's impossible to practice Tonglen when you're in a state of shock. So I think that it's completely and utterly impossible when you're in a state of shock to do Tonglen practice. I think the time to do the Tonglen practice is before the shock. So, so if we can do, if we can do at least a little bit of Tonglen on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
and when push comes to shove, we're still going to be in shock. But
Right.
the fact of the matter is that gradually over time, we will feel more compassion for others and for ourselves over time. I don't know that it will stop accidents from happening. I don't think that Tonglen will do that. But
No, but just the idea when you suffer, that
yeah,
if you dedicate it to the benefit of all beings, may my suffering.
and that's a really good way to practice when you don't feel like you can practice.
That's what I did. Well, we're doing Lin. I'm like, may some other woman who doesn't know her ass from her elbow regarding cars.
Mhm.
And, you know,
No
and
one suffer like this ever again. And I think and if that's what comes up, that's what comes up. And it's good that it comes up because that means that you've done some practice.
well,
And
what comes up for me is what is wrong with me that I feel guilty when something happens and it's not my fault.
I know.
Because like this guy said to me, you were rear-ended. It's not your fault. I
Mhm.
said, but what if it is? And I go to the police and then they arrest me because I got hit and ran. I mean, I wasn't running. I was driving as slow as possible to catch up with whoever this
Yeah.
occurred with, but I had no idea. I couldn't see what who hit me from behind, honestly.
what I can do, because I'm not a lawyer, so I can't.
No, no, I know, I know.
can't
I'm just, I'm sorry. I'm just, I guess, you know, trying to check in and be honest about what I'm feeling.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate the check-in. I feel sad that this has happened, and I'm very hopeful because I heard you mention that you have a lot of friends, and
No, I
so
didn't say I have a lot of friends. I said
oh,
I
sorry.
have, I've had to rely on friends at different times, and
Well,
you
then
know,
I'm hoping that some friends will be there for you because they can help you with advice, and maybe you even know someone who's a lawyer who can help you with those types of things too. And I'll say some prayers because that's something that I can do. I can't give legal advice or anything like that. And I can't give psychological advice either. So if you have a friend who's a counselor who you could talk with about the feelings that you have, I think that would be incredibly helpful. And but if nothing else, I'm happy that you are mostly okay. I'm sorry that this happened, and I will definitely make prayers that the people arise in your life, that as you walk through your day, that some people will arise who can give you some advice.
you
But
know, and that's the interesting thing when you said, I hope you're okay. You
yeah.
know, one thinks, oh my God, what if I weren't? And my cat and my dog were home alone and they couldn't eat and they couldn't get fresh water. And how would I even deal with that? Like, you know, there's always that feeling that we have as Buddhists. I think I feel this every time I leave my place. I may never come back again. Anything could happen out there. The world is crazy. You know, I think about that all the time
Mhm.
when I have to go out. And
Mhm.
sometimes I have to really force myself to go out. Like COVID kind of made me a bit agoraphobic, agoraphobic and like a homebody. Like, you know,
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
really, I find it very enervating being out in the world from
Yeah.
time to time.
I
And
feel
people are not the same socially or just in normal conversation as pre-COVID. I mean, even just at the pet store, you know, earlier tonight, like
Mhm.
a manager had to intervene because the other person wasn't understanding what I was buying and what I needed. And you know, like this things that seem so simple and straightforward,
Mhm.
like are suddenly like you feel like you're in the twilight zone. I don't know if anyone else feels that, but I certainly feel that way.
Mhm.
Um, I
Mhm.
don't think we'll ever be back to quote unquote normal.
I really, I'm very sorry that this has happened, and I'm glad that you're mostly okay, and I appreciate you checking in with me and asking about this, about the Tonglen practice. And again, my hope is that through this check-in that you're feeling a little better, and that I'll say some prayers so that things continue to improve for you.
I
And
appreciate it. I'm just like overwhelmed with
Mhm.
so much. I'm having a health problem right now, then this car thing, then I have this great dog and I thought I got him past marking, but if I leave the house, he has terrible separation anxiety and he will mark. He stopped marking in public. You
Mhm.
know, when I take him places, he never does that anymore. You'd be happy to know, Jody. Thank goodness. But, um, you know, it's like it, this feeling of constant overwhelm is
Mhm.
just horrendous.
Well, then,
Of
as we close tonight, because we're a little over time
oh,
now.
so sorry, Kathy.
Yeah, it's all right. But we do need to close for the sake of the others, and maybe another time can be arranged for a larger check-in by more people. But in the meantime, maybe what we could do here is at the conclusion of our program, maybe what we could do is lift up all beings who are feeling overwhelmed this evening, and dedicate the merit of our being together tonight to the accomplishment of well-being for everyone. And so, if it's all right, I'd like to offer a prayer. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. All right. Thank you.
Lama,
Yeah.
Lama